We're going to be finalizing our request to the YouTube API within this lesson. So adding in an input field, whatever term we're searching within the input field, we're going to search to a particular channel. So I've added in the parameter for the channel ID, and this is actually going to be my YouTube channel. So it allows me to search and retrieve back results that are matching the query within the YouTube channel. So if we had JavaScript, we would search that channel and return back all of the results to a maximum of 20 results. And we're also going to be applying some styling to the page elements so that they resize better and outputting them to the page. So that's all coming up in this lesson. Now that we can retrieve back the YouTube data, we've confirmed that our API is working. Let's create some more page elements. We'll create an input, and this can be our input field to search for the data. I'll give it a name of my input, and using the document create element, we're going to create an element, and this is going to be an input element. So just as we did with the button, we want to add the input to the page. So using the output and then append, and append the my input object to the page. Let's also update some of the properties that we have for input. And before we add them to the page, I'm going to update the text content of output, and we'll just write search YouTube. So this can serve as essentially a label for the input field, and then we've got our input field and then the get data once we have a result within the input field. Also, let's apply some properties. So set attribute. The attribute that we're going to set is going to be the type, and set it as type text. Also for the my input, I'm going to put a default value, and it's going to be my last name. So we have a default value of default search term that we can use. And I'll update this to be the base, and so that will contain the basic base URL. And then when we click it, we're going to construct a new URL using the base, and I'll use the template literals again, so the backticks, and we'll pull in the base content. So it's going to be that basic URL, and let's paste in. So we've got the key, and we can also include the key as part of the base as well. So return and include all of this, and it's optional how you want to structure your base. So in this case, we're going to set it up as the URL and set the max there. And let's remove out that console log for the URL. So now when we click it, just to make sure that we're still able to return back the results, we'll create a function, add data, and then whatever data object that we want to add. So this is going to be an array. And so when we have all of the data that's come back from the fetch request, we're going to be ready to add that to the array. So we can loop through using for each and get each one of the results. And for now, what we'll do is we'll console log out the result into the console so that we can take a closer look at the data structure that's being returned back. So we get this information where we've got the ID for the value. So let's add this content into the output area. And within the output area, I'm going to add another one for adding the results. So let's create another, and I'll call it my list, and using the document create element. And the element that we'll create is a div. And then with output, we'll append the my list object. So this gives us an element that we can add content into. And that's going to be the my list. And I'll just select the inner HTML and clear out any HTML that might already be existing. And now we're ready to add to that list. So let's create a main element. So this is going to be the main element that we're going to use to structure the content of the results. So using document create element, create another div. And then for the my list, we're going to append the main element that we've just created. And for now, let's add in some content into the main element. And we can add in the ID and the video ID value into the list. So within the, as we're looping through, select my list and set the text content to the list. And the text content will be what we have back from the result object and the ID object. And then contained within there, nested in there, we've got a video ID. So let's see what we get output to the page when we click the get data. So we output the result to the page. And let's refresh that and try that one more time. So it looks like what's happening here is that we're only getting that one result, because within the my list, and actually this should be within the main, this is where we should have the text content. So that's why we're only getting the one result, because it was overriding the other ones. So that gives us a list of all of the YouTube IDs for the elements of the page. And with the YouTube ID, we can actually return back the result of a YouTube video. So if we combine that result ID, and I'll output that into the console, I'll just call it YT, and append it to the YouTube BE. So if we take the YT and add the ID to it, that will create the URL for the video. So let's list that. So we can use that to add the link for the videos. So let's add another element. So instead of doing the main text, we can skip that, and we can add within there a hyperlink. And I'll just call it my link and use the document create element. The element that we're going to create is an anchor tag. The my link text content will be this ID for the video, for video ID. Then let's try that. So get the data and refresh that. And we still need to add the link to the page. So we're going to add that into main. So main append the my link. And that's going to be the anchor tag that we just created. So let's try that and click the get data. And that outputs them all to the page. If we go and we look at the source, we can see within the div, we've created the anchor. We don't have text in all of the anchors, so we have to account for that as well. If there's no ID, then we're not going to add the item to the page. So let's also add that in as a condition, just to make sure that there is an element with an ID. And if there's no ID, so if, then here we can add all of this. Otherwise, we're just going to skip it. So we need to set up a source. So we've got the my link using the set attribute, setting the source. And the source is going to be the same as we've got here for the path. And I just need to set the const variable for the YouTube. And I can do that within the parent of the get data. So let's try that and see what we get for the output. And then for the anchors, so now we've got the source for the anchor tags. And actually this should be the href. And do the get data and then output. And let's see what we've got. So we should have all these active hyperlinks. I'm going to also set another attribute there to target blank, so it opens up in a new page. So set attribute, and the attribute that I want it to set is target, and the value is going to be just to open to a blank page. So try that again. So now we've got all of the links, and they're going to open up within a new page and play the YouTube video. So that gives us the listing of the link data. Let's also add in some additional details that we get from the element object, from the returned response object data. So we also have information within the snippet. And within the snippet, we do have a description as well. So let's add the snippet description. So select that snippet, and that's going to be description. And we'll create another element for the description. And we can also create one for the title as well. So create an element, and I can just call it description. and document create element, and this one can be a paragraph. So we'll add the paragraph afterwards, and we've got the main object, append the description, and then for the description, text content is going to be equal to this value from the result. So it's going to be a string value. So get data, and now we're outputting all of the descriptions of the videos on the page there. So let's go back to the snippet, and we should also get the title as well. So within the snippet, we've got a title for the element content. So we can add that within the description if we want, or we can set it as bold. So let's add that into the page. And I'm going to use the inner HTML and the template literals. So we can add the description, and then within here, we'll add in the snippet title information. So that's our title, and then that's the description. So I'll make the description small within the small tags. So that gives us the description, and we should also have this on a new line. Or actually, I'm going to set it up as an H3. So close off the H3, and then here we can open the H3. So that gives us the titles, the descriptions, and I'm also going to add the link afterwards. After we add and we append the description, we'll add in the link afterwards. So next up, let's also select the thumbnails. So we also have an option for thumbnails where we could go the default, the medium, high thumbnails. So let's create another element. And depending on where we want to add this, I'll call it thumb. And then using the document create element. And the element that we're creating is an image. And let's add that also into main. So main append, and we'll append the thumbnail content. And within thumb, we can set the attribute. So we're setting the source value for the attribute, and that's going to be, the source value is going to be within the res, and that's within the res snippet, thumbnails, default, and URL. So hopefully that's the full path, and we'll see what happens. So that allows us to load the images. You can also make it channel specific as well. So I've gone over to my YouTube channel. You can get the ID from your YouTube channel just within the URI, and then copy that, and we can make it part of the request that we're going to be looking for the channel ID, and it needs to include we're only looking for data that's included within this channel ID. So let's just channel ID and save that, and I'll see what the results now. So now it's going to be looking for videos only from my channel, and that's actually what we wanted. I'm also going to update how the URLs, the links, are being shown, as they're standing out quite far out of that. So let me add it, and I'm going to add it to the DS after we've got the inner HTML added. So instead of appending the link to main, I'm going to append the link to the DS for the description. So let's see how that looks. And it needs to be within the curly bracket. So we've got within that scope. So that gives us the title there and the content, and then we've got the link to get the video. Let's also update the main element and apply some style properties to it, where we can add in a border so that we can distinguish between them. Solid, and just do a fairly light colored grayish type border. And then we'll add in some padding around it as well. So main style border, and we'll set, and actually this should be padding, and the padding can be 10 pixels. I'm going to also shrink the page back down to 100%. So that way we're getting these types of results. And then initially we probably might want to display them better. Also, let's see what else we have for the thumbnails. So that's the default. If we want a high quality thumbnail, we can select the high, or we could select the medium. So let's try and see how that's going to look when we're selecting the output. So instead of the default resolution for the thumbnail, we can update this and do medium, and we get the data. So it's going to give us a slightly larger thumbnail for the results. There's also an Explorer that you can use. So within the developer docs and within the docs, so I'm just going over to the developer docs, and here they give you an option to try out the different queries. They also give you information about what you can search by, the different search requests. So the base URL is there, and then part is a string for developer. So that's our channel ID that we set. So you can set any one of these properties and values. You can restrict it to a location, right radius. That's the maximum results that we're setting. And this is all available within the HTTP URL, as we're just sending a regular GET request in order to return back the results. So you have all of these different parameters that you can, and there's also the try, the API. So we've got the API, so the string value that we're searching, also the channel ID that we're using. So let me get that channel ID so we can add that in. So you can add the channel ID, the channel type, so this is a drop down, and event type for developers. So you can add in and customize all of these. And there's our query string. So the part that we're returning back. So this should be snippet. And then for the query, this is where we've got the string value that we're querying within the API. And you can execute it, or you can just show the code. So if you execute, it's going to ask you to log into your Google account and allow the API to run, and that will return back the relevant results. And that's exactly what we're seeing being returned back within the page results here. So it's the same content. This gives you a way to explore without having to make the requests from your application. And if you do a show code, this will give you the code. So there's the curl code, there's the HTTP with the raw response, where you can see the JSON response. And this is rather long, but this is what we've got for the GET request. There's also the JavaScript. So if you want to make the OAuth and bring in the OAuth, there's got the code for there. And you can use the same API key and then make the request and load the data whenever the button is clicked. They've got Java, PHP, Python. So there's a number of ways to try this API and return back the results. So once you're happy with the results that you're getting and you're outputting them to the page, then you can customize how it's being output to the page, apply some styling to it. So what I'm going to do is I'll just apply a little bit of styling to the main element. And we'll set up as style and setting the width. So set the width to 25%. So let's see what kind of results we get back then. And also to the style, and set the display to inline. So that will inline them. And we see now the images are slightly larger. So we need to set a max width for the image to be 100%, so it fits into our blocks. So within the thumb, and actually what I'll do is I'll apply within the styling, and we'll add in a class. So just do the box, and also for all the elements, we'll apply box sizing of border box. And within the box element itself, we'll set max width of 100%. And then for the thumbnail, let's go ahead and we'll apply to the thumbnail using class list add, and we'll add in the box class to it. And you'll see what that looks like. And we also need to have the consistent height for the elements so that they all are stacking properly. So let's set a height for main, and we can set the height, and I'll update this to be 25. And it looks like we got to make it slightly larger to 40. And then the main style, and we'll do the overflow to scroll. So that will get them all to be the same size, and it creates a much more neater effect. You can also do the overflow hidden as well. So that gives us ability to search the YouTube API and return the results accordingly. So you can try it out within your own application, make some customizations to the search query, and even customize the way that the results are being output to the page.